Hi, my name is Sage, and this week I heard that Minecraft got an update and there is a new mob that's called Copper Golems. And I think these little guys are so cute and rad, so I wanted to make one out of clay. And so to embark on this journey, I'm gonna need some clay and some tinfoil. Next, I'm gonna take that tinfoil and fold it up hot dog style and flatten it out, and then fold that hamburger style and flatten that out as well before adding even more tinfoil up top of it, as I'm just trying to make the base of my little guy. And during this part, I'm making everything all nice and flat and cohesive, and then I just start adding more and more tinfoil and it just gets more and more chaotic. But that's okay. It doesn't look right now, but I'm trusting the process. At least that's what I was telling myself. And now that the tinfoil is looking like a deformed mushroom, I then add clay up top of it and bam, it now looks like this. And you probably guessed it, now it's time to rolling pin this over and over and over again, because I'm really bad at making things like straight edges, and this little Minecraft guy is obviously a bunch of squares and rectangles. So this is gonna be me trying my best. And I also refuse to do any type of math. These squares and rectangles are purely made out of vibes. All I'm looking for is the essence of a rectangle, not that it actually is. Next, I take my pointy stylus and start carving out some leg shapes for him. And I also carve out his neck while doing this as well, and I do that on all sides just to really emphasize where things begin and things end. After that, I take a little piece of clay and mold it around a little bit to make somewhat of a rectangle shape, and I put that on his face as that will be his little nose. I then take another little rectangle piece of clay and put that up top of his head for his little antenna. And I was thinking that maybe it's not an antenna at all, maybe it's a lightning rod because they're made out of copper and he's a copper guy, right? So that makes sense. And I love building up in the sky in Minecraft, so I know all about the lightning rods. No one's gonna get me if I'm really high in the sky, you know what I mean? And this is where I attempt to do some blending with my straight edge stylus, and I just do my best before then taking the old rolling pin and making sure everything's all nice and flat. I then realize I need some more clay on one side of his head, so then I add some and then I smush him into my mat. But that doesn't stop me from using the rolling pin yet again. And I continue this process of adding more clay, using the rolling pin, and then smushing him down even more until eventually I'm like, you know what? It's now time to make his eyes. And so I pancake out a piece of clay and make it somewhat into a rectangular shape and realize this is way too big. So then I use my straight edge stylus and cut that in half before then putting it back on his head and being like, you know what? This is pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. So then I add another eye, just to realize actually I hate them both and I ripped them off. And the reason why I hated them was because I put them too high on his head, so I have to adjust that. Then I realized, you know what, I kind of made them a bit too thin, so then I add even more clay up top of them so they kind of just stand out a little bit more. I know they look flat to the head in the images, and they probably are, but I like making the eyes stand out a little bit, so I wanted to make mine a little bit thicker. And so I begin my process of embarking on this journey of making the eyes a little bit thicker with my straight edge stylus. And once I am done adjusting the eyes, I then take a piece of clay that's already suspiciously rectangular and I use the rolling pin on it even more, as this will be his future arm. And I then realize that his arm is way too long, so I'm gonna need to chop part of it off. Next, I re-roll it with the rolling pin, and then I just adjust it a little bit more by just using my fingers. And it's a decent shape, so then I make another one, and then I realize that these are cousins and not twins. So I'm going to need to fix that, because his arms will be lopsided if not. And so I make the smaller arm a little bit thicker to match the other one because I like the thick arms, you know, because rectangles and Minecraft, and I just think that's cute. And so I get them to relatively the same size, and then I begin to blend them to the body. And I do so by using my straight edge stylus. I don't know why I decided to use this stylus instead of my ball stylus to blend everything out. I think it's because it had a straight edge and I'm just trying my best to make everything as square and rectangular as possible. Next, I do some side quests just to do some touch-ups on random areas of his body. And I get distracted for a while before then realizing, you know what, his little antenna needs to have that little thing on the top of it. So then I start to make a little rectangular shape out of clay and then I pop that right on the top of his antenna. Before then blending everything out, and you may be like, Sage, that looks a little bit more rectangular than it should. And yes, because I also want it to have the vibe of a flower pot. And you may be like, what? So as you can see here, I'm putting in a wire and this will be the beginnings of a poppy flower because get this. Iron golems, you know, the ones that protect the villages, they can give the flower that they have, so the poppies, to the copper golems and place it on their heads. Isn't that adorable? So I wanted to add that to mine. And so I make the little poppy and give it some leaves before then just doing random touch-ups all over him, like using the ball stylus to kind of flatten everything out and also making the divots more pronounced so you can actually see them and everything's nice and clear until eventually he looks like this, and then I pop him into the oven and now he looks like this, pretty much the exact same. But now he's baked. And now I can start to paint him, yay! And I have to mix my own paint because I don't have any copper paint. So I end up taking some red and some burnt umber and white and mixing them all together. And I know it's not the best copper in the entire world, but I tried really hard. And for the first layer of paint, as you can tell, it's a little see-through, so it looks a little crazy right now. And that's okay, you know, it's the first layer, it's not supposed to look the best. But then I realized that this is getting a little bit too dark, so I take some white while it's like half still wet so it can mix into the color. And the reason why I do this is because I know that it's getting a little bit too dark, and you know when paint dries, it can dry slightly different shades, and I was like, uh-oh, I should fix that real quick because I'm gonna be adding more layers. So now I need to leave that alone for a hot minute so it can dry, so I move on to painting the poppy. And so I go in with the same red color that I used to blend him all out, and I also paint the leaves and the stem at this time too, and I use a green color, and as you can tell, this is gonna need a couple of layers as well because it's looking a little splotchy. And speaking of layers, bam! I then do another 2 layers of paint on him, and now he looks like this, so I can begin the detailing. I know I didn't color match perfectly, but I did try my best. And to begin with the details, I give him his eyebrows and his little bracelets. And I do that on both sides before then moving on to giving him some eyelids too. I gave him kind of like half eyelids because I think he's a really chill guy, you know, like he's just vibing. He has a flower on his head and not a care in the world, just full of love and being chill. Next, I give him his little toes. At least I think they're his toes. They could be his feet. I don't know what these are. All that I know is that he had the markings of them and I was gonna add them. And I do that on the front and the back as well. But before I add them on the back, I then give him his little circle thing. I don't know what this is either, but I thought it was super cute. It's like a little circle sigil, and he has one on the front and back as well, and I add the one on the back later, because obviously the front's gonna be first. And I add some variation of color around the circle as well, just so it stands out a little bit more. Next, I darken up the top edges of his legs before then going in and brightening up his face a little bit. And once that's done, I give his antenna some more variation of color in the copper tones as well, before then repeating everything that I did on the front, on the back. And this is where I took a little bit more artistic liberty. So on the back of his head and the sides of his head, I paint on bigger squares / rectangles so I can build up the pixelated look later by adding more squares and rectangles on top of what I already put down. So while I'm waiting for those to dry so I can add more stuff to them, I then begin to add in the golden eyes, and this is gonna take a while because the gold needs so many layers. But with the power of editing, bam, it's done. And now I can begin to add in the smaller rectangles and squares up top of the bigger ones, before then continuing the adding of smaller squares and rectangles in various spots sporadically all over him, and I continue this process until I'm done. And that's the art piece. I would like to say thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And now it's time for the glamour shots.